and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. I am your host, Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by my neighbor who's been spending an unusual amount of time with my wife lately. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going, Matt?
Well, since you can never see my face, you can't prove anything.
Where did you get that tie?
Abroad.
I see what you did there.
It's a double entendre.
Entendre. This week on the show, our blind spotting series continues as we continue to go through our 10 selected films from the BFI Sight and Sound 2022 critics poll that has the top 100 films of all time. Of course, these would be the 10 films we haven't seen, hence the term blind spots. You know, Matt, this is the 8th one of this, and I still haven't come up with a good way to introduce the segment that isn't a bunch of word mush.
Okay, that's fine.
But there's no hope for us, basically. It's too late now.
It's too late now. That's the spirit.
This week, we're on my fourth pick. We're talking about the 2000 Hong Kong love story titled In the Mood for Love. So we're going to be talking all about this movie, and I have a lot to say about this movie. I'm kind of overwhelmed by it, and I didn't want to move into it right away, but just introducing it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so much to say. So we're going to talk for a while about that movie, and then we did want to wrap up the episode. I think we have kind of another quick grab bag of stuff that we've seen recently or seen in the news recently. So we're gonna chat about a movie, a video game, and streaming services, as we always do.
Yep.
All right, Matt, let's get into our main segment of the week, though. Let's talk about Wong Kar-Wai's In the Mood for Love. Matt, what is this movie all about?
Two neighbors form a strong bond after both suspect extramarital activities of their spouses. However, they agree to keep their bond platonic so as not to commit similar wrongs.
This movie was written and directed by Wong Kar-Wai. It stars Tony Leung and Maggie Chung. It is number five on the Sight and Sound poll, the 5th best film of all time, according to critics. And I loved it, Matt. I had heard this is one of those movies that I kept hearing about, and if you follow anyone on YouTube, eventually anyone that has a film YouTube channel, I feel like makes a video essay about this movie eventually. And now that I've seen it, I completely understand why. And so I've always wanted to watch it. I did actually know, kind of going into this movie, that this is the movie about the two people that love each other, but never act upon it and don't end up together at the end. So I kind of knew that going into it, but it didn't take away any of it for me. I was kind of blown away by this film. But what did you think of it?
Yeah, every so often you watch a movie and it makes you feel like every movie that you've seen in recent memory was a piece of crap. And that was this. I kind of share your feeling of God, how do you even approach this? It feels like the kind of thing that people write dissertations about, or rather they write dissertations about the use of mirrors in the film. And that's just one of the many aspects that we're going to just offhandedly blow by. Right. It's kind of a perfect movie. It's it's all the things that I like about what you can do with film, except somehow more so because it often impresses me with how much it's able to communicate. I guess that's one place I could start, is just with my experience of the movie, continually being impressed at how the movie doesn't hold your hand. It doesn't really use, it's not that it doesn't use cinematic language in the traditional way. It's more like it uses it in a very sort of ephemeral, impressionistic way.
Yeah.
Where you really have very little sense of when things are happening, unless of course there's literally a title card with the year on it, which happens occasionally.
Yeah.
But I mean, moment to moment, shot to shot, often you're disoriented in terms of time and even space in some cases. Very few things are actually said explicitly in the movie by anyone. and and the things that are said are usually like the sort of superficial, um uh uh, almost misleading thing that the character is not even really trying to get across, and what they're trying to get across is something deeper that is being inferred, and that is being communicated with body language and subtle eye movements, and these, um just
Yeah.
just in all these ways, an incredibly rich viewing experience that reminded me of what you can do with this form of art.
Yeah, man, well said. I mean, I think there are times in this podcast where like we approach a movie and we end up just talking about the story a lot, and that's because from like a perspective of filmmaking, like there's just not a lot that jumped out at me about like, angles and lenses and cinematography and those kind of things. And then there's movies like this where like everything was jumping out at me.
Mhm.
Like I think you're so right that it's not that the film isn't communicating; it's constantly communicating to you, and it does so in these ways that like almost demand that you draw their attention to them. Like I think you pointed out the time stuff, which is so great because there's so many shots to clocks in this movie. Like it'll just be like an establishing the sequence of a scene is a close up on a big wall mounted clock, but like that doesn't orient you anywhere because it's
Yeah.
just like, oh, so it's 6:30. Okay, great. When are we like? How many
Uh,
days have passed since the last time we saw these characters? Who knows? So it's almost like fooling you a little bit. And
yeah.
then the big thing that stood out to me almost immediately and continued throughout the entire movie is the way Wong Kar-Wai uses like frames within the frame.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
like characters are constantly framed by doors or windows, or there's always something like foregrounded in front of them, whether it be a window or something. Like very, very rarely in this movie do you see a character who's just like alone in the frame without anything in the foreground or background that kind of shapes their world. And it's so immediately arresting because it does this very specific. It does a few things. I think this is the kind of the genius of this movie to me. It makes it seem like they're very confined in space. Because like as much as you watch this on a big screen TV, it's a big screen, but like the frame isn't big enough to contain them and shrunken down, so they're just a smaller piece of it. And then it also makes it seem like you're always kind of observing them from a distance a little bit.
Mhm.
And so like we're kind of just witnessing something and prying in on something, which I think is great because that's kind of the view of the characters, right? They constantly feel like everyone is watching them, everyone is gossiping about them. That at any second someone could discover this thing that they're doing that isn't really an affair, but also is an affair. Just like great cinematic touches that I just loved. I think my favorite one is this really the hotel room that they get, and one wall of the hotel, the hallway in the hotel is this beautiful like red curtain almost,
Mhm.
almost as if like they're on a stage, or right on the other side is the stage, and this is backstage. This is the one place that they can kind of be themselves and be true to the way they feel. It's just great work all around, just beautiful cinematography.
Yeah. I think, this all adds up to me to one of the most like emotional experiences. And it's not even like I was weeping or anything. Like there have been
Hmm.
movies that hit me like harder than this
Sure.
movie. But I can't think of any movies I've seen recently that hit me the same way, where it's like this pining, melancholic, um, doomed, love feeling, that and the movie just communicates, just beams it directly into your brain with some kind of telepathic um, ray,
Hmm.
and you just feel exactly the way these characters feel, and that's accomplished through all these techniques of cinematography that you use. The sort of losing your sense of time. It actually somehow sucks you into the frame of the movie where you begin thinking about your own past and love affairs and but not just that. Like it's not like it's just causing you to reminisce. It's also pulling you into this like highly specific and unique milieu that you're watching with these two characters.
Mhm.
I mean, a huge part of that is the acting, which the great thing about the acting, I guess, is like it's it's so subtle.
Yeah.
Like um Tony Leung barely emotes at all, and Maggie Chung like she's like cries a couple times, right?
Yeah,
But
but her crying is always in the context of a pretend
uh-huh.
reenactment of something that they're doing,
Hmm.
which is fascinating in its own right.
Yeah, it is, right? So like all of the emoting, all of the real, and I agree, like that her crying moments weren't even the moments where I was like feeling anything.
Mhm.
It was the scenes where they're like having a meal together, and like you can tell that both of them want this to be more than it is, and but neither of them wants to be the one to push it further. And
Yeah.
then maybe, maybe I forget the characters' names, and I'm terrible with pronunciation anyway. But the man, like I think the man falls harder than the woman, and he at a certain point feels like, okay, I can't keep pretending that this is just a game. But he realizes, I think correctly, that it doesn't mean as much to her as it does to him, or at least she's got a lot more going on. It's more complex for her. She can't kind of just leave her husband as easily as he could probably just leave his wife. And
Yeah.
and he's aware of all this, and all these things I'm saying, none of them are like explained to you. And it'd be
No.
interesting to hear, like, maybe you even have a different sense of what the characters are thinking and feeling than I do, although I would be surprised if it was too different. But it's all just like, they say a thing and then their eyes kind of flick to the other person's face for a second and then flick
Yeah.
away just to check, like, how did that land? You know, it's all, the tiniest little gestures, and the camera knows exactly how to frame it to
Mhm.
convey what needs to be conveyed. Um, it's just
Yeah,
remarkable.
and the use of hands and how they touch
Hmm.
each other with their hands, always kind of slight and careful and quiet, and like it's oh man, everything. That's what I mean when you say it's the perfect film. Like it's because every decision in every moment feels like the exact correct decision to convey that scene and that point and that idea. Um, I think, yeah, I mean, I agree with you with your kind of assessment of the characters. I think, my read on the difference between the characters a little bit was he in the society they live in, he's a little bit more free
Hmm.
to pursue these feelings in a way that she is not. This is
Yeah.
1960s Hong Kong. This is uh women did not have a lot of choices and a lot of options in anything. um and and so he's not that he's completely free and to do whatever he wants, obviously not, but he's just a little bit more, and so he's able to act a little bit more reckless than she is.
Hmm.
And so but I mean, I think she's as committed to it as he. I think her decision to show up at the hotel at the end, just unfortunately a bit too late, like clarified that for me,
Hmm.
that she would have gone with him had she just gotten there a little bit faster.
Yeah, I think maybe so. It's interesting because I'm actually unsure, and when I say that, I literally mean like I'm not sure that I was following the film exactly toward the end, because toward the end it's different, where the time jumps begin to become much larger
Hmm.
suddenly.
Yeah.
I mean, I say sud like it literally gives you title cards making you aware that that's happening. But I think for me, so my personal experience was like I didn't know that they weren't going to end up together. In fact, I really wanted them to end up together, and it just kind of felt like that's where we were going with the movie.
Hmm.
And then as we begin to take these bigger and bigger time jumps, you see, and this like horrible sadness came over me because I realized, like, oh, they obviously are like they're sort of making these gestures to maybe find the other person or reach out to them, but they sort of already realize that this is a futile gesture. Like, it feels real. It doesn't feel like a movie, because if it were a
Yeah.
movie, if this were a movie we were watching, then she would be getting on the airplane and he would run out on the tarmac and wave his arms, and then she would run out of the plane crying, and they would hug, and the credits would roll. And it's like, no, it's these people who are like, both of them are these very sort of emotionally constipated people who are deeply in love, but they can't express it. And they both know the other person feels that way, but they can't like be the one to make the overture, but they're like almost making the overture. And then just time gets away from them. And, like a
Yeah.
year passes, and 2 years passes, and 5 years passes. And you see with each of these increments that they are still carrying this torch, but now it's just this wistful thing in their past that they
Yeah.
regret. It's not alive for them anymore.
Yeah, you're
Um,
you're so right, because like the Hollywood ending version of this is, she moves back into the apartment and is living there, and then he comes, which all this happens, by the way, and then he
mhm.
comes and checks in on the apartments and is like, oh, just tries to very casually ask, oh, what about them over in that apartment? And it's like, oh, just a woman and her kid lives there now, and that's her. And like he walks up to the door, and doesn't knock on it, right?
Yeah.
Like the Hollywood ending is like he doesn't knock, like he hesitates, turns away, turns back, and is about to walk away when the door opens, and they see each
Yeah.
other and can finally act upon this thing. Yeah, but that's not this movie. That's not what this story is.
Yeah.
And I think it's, you know it'd be one thing if this was a movie about two people who were married that fell in love with each other and really wanted to commit adultery and then didn't. But the choice to make it their spouses are the one doing it, right? That they kind of connect originally over the idea that their spouses are cheating on them with each other, and like that adds such a fascinating wrinkle to it, because that's like another brick in the way of them ever getting together, is like, well, we can't be like, we're horribly hurt and pissed at the people we love for doing this. We can't be like them. We can't do that. And it's just a wonderful idea, because like in every scene there's four people in the room. Even if
Yeah.
even if and by the way, another example of every choice was the correct choice, the idea to never show the faces of the two spouses
Uh-huh.
was just perfect. It was
Yeah.
just perfect, because you feel their presence, they're there, but they're also not characters. They're just ideas. They're just things. They're just obligations. So you don't form any attachment to those people at all, because they're not really people, and they're just like phantoms almost.
Mhm.
It's just a great idea, perfect idea,
Yeah.
where you feel them but they're not there. I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah. I agree. I love that touch. And also, like, I feel at least on her side, I think that I don't know if it even goes so far as to say that she still loved her husband, but she definitely still felt complex feelings that didn't just boil down to like, fuck him. Because like, I mean, she would get upset doing their little reenactments, just pretending to have found out that he, admitted that he was cheating. This
Yeah.
was so upsetting to her. And maybe, maybe that was not so much about him as about her, and like the shattering of her view of what she thought her life was going to be like, and so forth.
Hmm.
I wanted to reference that moment you talked about a second ago, where he kind of stops and looks at the door at the very end, and that she's, we the viewer know that she's just on the other side of that door with her son, which now she has a son.
Yeah. Surprise.
Yeah. I took, and the thing is, the movie absolutely doesn't tell you the answer, but like, I took it as he absolutely knows that that's her, and
Oh,
that she has a
fascinating.
kid. And he stops for a second and looks at the door, and like, what's going through his head as projected by me is, this is it. Are you going to barge into her life, or is this just over? And then he just leaves, because he recognizes that like the moment for this thing has passed,
Yeah.
And it's, and maybe that was the right decision, maybe it was the wrong decision. The ambiguity is sustained even to the very end when he, whispers his secret into the hole in the wall, and it's like, it's just like that moment in the Bill Murray movie where you don't get to hear what he said, but it doesn't matter
Yeah.
because you know what he said, and it's like you and I could totally disagree about what he said, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Your viewing experience is personal and unique, and you project onto it and you interact with it in your own unique way, and
Hmm.
that's what's really beautiful about this experience, I think.
Yeah, and I love speaking of that sequence, like I love that whole ending. I love it to death. It's melancholy, of course, but when he is whispering that secret into the hole in the building, how does Wong Kar-Wai frame it? We see it from a distance, and we see it over the head of someone watching him, right?
Hmm.
Like there's someone sitting there observing this, and we're right there with him. And so once again, this feeling of being observed, this feeling of putting something into the foreground, constant there. And then the movie ends as he just kind of walks slowly through these the kind of the ruins of this old building, right? This thing that has been kind of ravaged by time and is empty. That's the image we get to leave the movie on. This idea that there's not life here anymore because this was never going to be these people were never going to come together. They were never going to fall in love. They were never going to create a life together. It's just the kind of the hollowed out ruins of an old building.
Oh, that's
And that's
great.
it.
I mean, I love that you said that because part of me was like, why are we in Cambodia? Like, what does that mean? And I
Uh-huh.
think it. I mean, it's basically just like for not to be reductive, but it allows for this amazing set piece, which
Yeah.
is really just him talking to a wall briefly and then walking away. But it's beautiful. It's beautifully shot. It leaves you with that symbolic meaning is what it
Right. Yeah. I
does.
mean, the reason why I kind of thought about it for a while is it's set up earlier in the movie that he's sitting in Singapore talking to his friend about this tradition he heard of that in the old days people would whisper their secrets into a hole in a tree, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And we don't do that. We specifically don't do that in this movie. And I was like, okay, well, why a side of a building rather than a tree?
Hmm.
And that got me thinking. And then as I was thinking, I was observing the entire ending of the movie as we kind of pan through this empty, hollowed out building. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, God, it's one of those movies where you know get to the last frame and you're just like, and then and then it just ends, and you're like,
mhm.
oh, I guess that is how that had to end.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
wish that it hadn't.
yeah. I mean, I think you're
uh,
so right that this is one of those movies that like reminds me why I love filmmaking
mhm.
and why why we talk about why we have this show, right? Like this is
Yeah, right.
this is one of those reasons like that I want to talk to you about movies every week is films like this and
Yeah.
just the absolute pleasure that just sitting down and watching a movie like this gives me. Like, there have been times throughout this blind spot list that I was like, I get why this movie's on this list for like historical purposes and like the impact it had on the industry, but like really top 100 films ever. This one I'm like, "Oh, I totally know why everyone voted this number 5." Like I totally get it. A
Yeah.
bunch of people probably put this as their number 1 movie
Yeah.
because I have never watched a movie like this. I mean, I've watched like a lot of love story films and a lot of films when people don't get together, but the
Yeah.
way this is filmed, the way it's put together, just everything here makes this almost wholly unique in this world.
Hmm.
And I just I like I can't say enough good things about it. I cannot.
Yeah. um I agree. I need to watch it again, and
Yeah, I want
you
to
know
immediately watch it again.
maybe pay attention to some different things the second time around, because the first time, I think the first time you watch anything, you're basically watching it for the story. you're
Hmm.
you're you're kind of on tenterhooks wondering what's going to happen between these characters. And I it's not that I wasn't also noticing the cinematography and everything. I totally was. It's just like it was like a million little interesting things per minute happening, and I don't remember. Like, I normally have a really good memory for visual stuff, and I could be like, remember that one shot, And in this movie that happens, there's so many that one shots that I'm just
Yeah.
like, you remember that one shot where like she's like next to the mirror and like there's a bed and it's like there's nothing about it that I can point to and be like, this is why that was the most beautiful shot that I've ever seen in cinema. Because it's a woman sitting in front of a mirror and there's a bed and there's something about the lighting and the angle of the camera relative to the surfaces in the room and the part of the frame the woman is in that just makes it the most well composed shot I've ever seen. It's not even important. It's not even like this is a crucial scene to the functioning of the narrative. It's and this is just one that stuck with me. I don't even know if you remember what I'm talking about because it's such a no one's talking, but that's what the whole movie is made out of, these shots
Yeah.
where it's like I don't know why, but that's incredibly perfect.
Yeah, I don't know which specific shot you're talking about, but like it could be one of hundreds because
Right.
you're absolutely right. Like this is a movie filled with these beautifully composed shots. This movie took 15 months to film.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 90-minute movie with basically two characters
Mm-hmm.
that sit in rooms and don't talk to each other. And it took 15 months to film.
Oh God. Yeah, no, I mean, and it makes sense because it's so meticulous. Like
Yeah. Mhm.
it almost out Fincher,
Yeah.
in terms of like just the perfection of everything. I mean, and weirdly like not feeling mannered. It just feels like you're caught up in someone's dream.
Yeah. Mhm. No,
More than
totally
it
right. Yeah.
feels like Finch. I love Fincher. I'm not trying to like criticize Fincher, but like you you sort of are aware that you're being guided through a story by this by this perspective in a Fincher movie, whereas this movie it just felt like, oh, these are things that are happening in front of me and I'm part of this.
Yeah.
um I love the way they use cigarette smoke is awesome.
Oh yeah. Well,
um,
just like the obsession with hands, I think is
mhm,
such a, and I think cigarettes was just a great way of constantly using cutting to hands and using how their hands did and
mhm,
didn't touch each other, how their hands reacted, they circled around each other. Gosh, every bit of it. I think one of my favorite scenes, by the way, I want to talk to you a lot about the kind of pretend play reenactments they're doing of
mm,
things. Um, I want to talk about the initial one, the first one they do right after they find out that their spouses are cheating. But the one that like just tickled the shit out of me was the one where she's rehearsing, um, telling her husband that she knows that
mm,
he's having an affair, and the, what Wong Kar-Wai does in this scene is
mm,
we've only ever seen this character referenced or from the back, right?
mhm,
And so the frame of the scene is we're seeing the husband from the back once again. She's talking to him. Her face is in frame, his back of his head, and and Wong Kar-Wai holds this thought for 2 minutes as she works up to confronting him and finally getting to admit to this affair, and then she slaps him, and then for the first time in the scene, he cuts to the opposite angle. And we are shocked to learn that this is not her husband, that this is Chow. And they're just rehearsing this whole confrontation again. And it's just the perfect, like you were so convinced what emotionally was happening in the scene until he pulls the rug out from under you.
yeah,
And now you have to completely recontextualize what the scene is about, because suddenly the scene is about her dealing with all this stuff and just using him as a sounding board of this, and almost an excuse, right? Like if they can play the spouse of the other, then they almost have an excuse to be more intimate, that to like the time she cries and leans on his shoulder, and like the times they touch, and the times that they get closest to real intimacy, real physical intimacy with each other, is when they're kind of play acting as the spouse of the other, which is just really fascinating.
yeah. Yeah, it's this game of brinkmanship that they're playing where
Yep.
neither of them neither of them, you know, neither in their own eyes nor in the eyes of the other do they want to be perceived as crossing that line that they've drawn for
Yeah.
themselves. But they kind of wish the other person would, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
um,
totally. Totally.
and
Yeah.
so they create these games, um, and these excuses. And I mean, for some reason, the most heartbreaking part. Well, there's a lot of heartbreaking parts. One of the most heartbreaking threads for me was this idea where, one of the first times they meet, it's over the fact that she wants to borrow this, or maybe he wants, I forget who's borrowing from whom, but they want to borrow a copy of like this, Chinese martial arts serial. I almost said web
Hmm.
serial that they have, and they clearly both have something of a passion for these serials. And then and he's like, yeah, I wanted to write one when I was younger, but I didn't. And which I think, just parenthetically, is like a great little like character trait for him to
Yeah.
have, where he's like, yeah, I always wanted to write one of these. And she's like, well, why didn't you? And he's like, oh, I just didn't.
I just
and
didn't.
and
Yeah.
and I think what he says is like, I couldn't get started. And I'm like, wow, what a perfect way of describing who this guy is. Because this like that's all you need to know is he's a guy who doesn't act on things, um, and
Hmm.
and and then but then uh he sort of, I think he sort of views this as like, well, maybe I could write the serial, not for its own sake, but as an excuse to talk to her again.
Yeah.
And then like their tryst becomes like meeting up to work on fiction writing together,
Yeah.
which is
Secretly. Yeah.
secretly meeting to work on martial arts serial together. Which again, I like that poetically, because it's like, what are they, what are they doing together? They're constructing a fiction together. It's
Yeah.
not real.
Yeah.
But it is like the only time in the movie when they really seem happy with each other, and not like, oh, we're basically doing this out of spite. Like they're just enjoying doing that together.
Yeah.
And it almost gets too far, and then like that's the point at which she's like, we can't see each other this much because people are talking. um but like, yeah, the whole that whole plot line I just thought was great. Like, again, if this were a Hollywood movie, that would have been the thing where like they fall in love over their shared love of writing whatever together.
Yeah. But it is just another line of, using fiction, as you said, as a method of working the stuff out. I mean, my favorite in that is kind of the culminating moment of these plays they put on with each other, where they're talking to each other about um the fact that they can't do this anymore, right? That he's going to go home and he's never going to see her again, and this is the end. And then at the end of that scene, he goes, but we're just rehearsing. Like, this isn't this isn't the time we're doing this. Actually, this is just another part of our play. This is another rehearsal. And that's, I think, the second time she breaks down and cries, right?
uh
And so it's the fiction is so important to them that even that moment, they're just going to push that off into the fiction. This is not something we have to deal with. It's just part of the fiction we've concocted for ourselves.
yeah. Yeah, and there is, I think, no real moment where they're like, it's over. It just peters out, which to me
Hmm.
is even sadder,
Yeah. I mean,
and more realistic.
he just goes to Hong Kong, or he just goes to Singapore,
Hmm.
and she doesn't go with him. I mean,
Yeah.
I love that moment. Like, I don't know. I guess the one thing I wasn't quite sure on is, we have the phone call that he says to her, which is like, if there's an extra ticket, will you come with me? We don't hear her say anything to that, and then he leaves. She goes to the hotel. He's already left. Sits there, and then we hear her repeat that line again.
Hmm.
Um, which I thought was fascinating, and I didn't know what to make of that, because like, why is she repeating that line? And
Hmm.
like, I don't. This maybe it's part of her fiction when she's creating her story, where she's the one that
Hmm.
asked. I don't know, because I mean, that's one thing is, to your point of the movie doesn't ever like hold your hand and explain exactly what's happening. That sequence where he asks her to go with him, like, she shows up at the hotel room,
Hmm.
and you could interpret that as she's decided to come, but he had already left and she showed up late. You could also interpret that as she decided not to go, waited until she knew he was gone, and then just went to the hotel room to, like, wistfully think about him and miss
Yeah.
him, right?
I agree that it's ambiguous, and in fact, I was pretty confused. I was genuinely like, "Wait a second, is this in Singapore? Like, did she follow him to Singapore?"
Well, that's a year later that she does follow him to
She
Singapore.
okay, okay, so that's a different
Yeah,
scene you're talking about.
yeah.
Okay, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, so I was talking about the
Yeah,
scene in the original hotel room where they
yes,
worked on the martial arts story.
yes. I and okay, you're totally right about that. But then, like, and not to get off topic, or but like a similar thing happens again where she goes to Singapore
Mhm.
and then doesn't actually, like, she could just like go to his office, or I mean she calls him and then doesn't say anything when he answers
Yeah,
the phone. So like
yeah,
she really she's really like pushing herself right up to the edge of this and just can't cross over, and they both are in the same situation where, I mean, that yeah, like that's the tragedy of it, is it's so obvious to you, the viewer, where you're like, come on, just somebody make something happen, and like
yeah,
neither of them
somebody
is
do
going to be the
something.
one.
Yeah,
um and yeah, and also, like, again, like you empathize with it, you feel it, you're like, yeah, I
yeah.
can believe this happened.
Never
So
have I
good.
wanted adultery to happen more
Yeah,
than in this than in this movie, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I do wanna go back to that original scene because, the original choice to rehearse, so, like, once again, a beautiful thing about this movie is, he casually asks her, "Where'd you get that purse? I wanna get one for my wife," and she asks him, "Where'd you get that tie? I really like it," and the answer to both is, "Oh, out of town," and then they both reveal, "Oh, my wife has a purse just like that," indicating that her husband must have bought it for her, and she says, "Yeah, my husband has a tie just like that," indicating that she bought it for him, right? And
hmm
once again, that indication goes completely unsaid, right? Like,
yeah,
there's a version of someone watching this movie who's like, "What?
yeah,
Wait, what does that mean?" But the most fascinating thing to me is that the scene immediately following that revelation is not them, getting angry and wanting to confront their spouses, or even just like commiserating with each other. They're immediately like, "Okay, how did this happen?
yeah,
Like, what must have happened for the two of them to actually get together?" And then they play act it. And it's such an interesting paradigm because she's pretending to be his wife, hitting on her husband, kind of trying to figure out what someone else that's not her could have done to seduce the man that she loves.
yeah,
And then the same thing vice versa. But they don't know the person they're playing as,
hmm
but they know the person they're trying to seduce. And so, like, they're having to give each other like pointers of like, no, 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 he wouldn't do that, she wouldn't say that. It's this really fascinating thing because, like, it's in this moment, you as a person, if you've just found out your spouse is treating, are probably like, I clearly am not giving my spouse something that they need, and so they sought elsewhere for it. And I'm not saying that's actually what's happening, but like that's the thing that you think in your head, right? Is I wasn't giving them something, so they found that something elsewhere, and so she's then forced to immediately like act out what that thing could possibly be, but
yeah,
she doesn't know because if she had it, she would just be giving it to him, right? Like, I don't know.
hmm
It's just this really fascinating construction, I think.
yeah. And I think another, reading between the lines slash projection thing is, like, I think they both already know that they're in a bad marriage. They're in a marriage where their spouse doesn't really care about them and is spending so much time away, at least in
Yeah, they
part
never
because
see each other.
they just don't care. Like the marriage is just like, this is the thing that I did, but I don't really,
Yeah.
it's not important to me. And then they're leaving their spouse. You get this sense that, like, both of the spouses that we never see are like more successful than the spouses that we do see.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and and so, like, they both feel kind of like a a burden slash irrelevancy. And I mean, I think, yeah, so like I think she is like shocked and brokenhearted and insulted, but he seems like
He doesn't care.
essentially unsurprised and doesn't care, because he's like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I guess that might as well happen on top of everything else. um And yeah, and again, this is they never tell us any of this.
Hmm.
It's all subtext. And again, it's so subtextual that I really do wonder, like, how much of this am I just bringing to the movie? You know, how much of this is just me, which is fine. Again, like I think that's so much of what art is really fundamentally is like, what is it? What is it stirring in you,
Yeah.
which is idiosyncratic to you and personal, and um, and that's in its own way just as beautiful or even more beautiful, you could say, than like the artist, pinpointing a specific thing that they're demanding that you feel. It's more like they're just stirring things up for you in your own heart, and seeing
Hmm.
what happens.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it kind of again makes me want to rewatch it, knowing how everything's going to go and seeing the ways that my personal interpretation in the moment was turning everything, because
Mhm.
I don't know. Like there is so much unsaid, so much up in the air. Like just that central fact of like which one of them was more into the other is
Yeah.
something that like I could probably watch this movie a handful of times and maybe have a different opinion on that each time. Uh,
Hmm.
and I think that's one of the great things about it is so much of that is unsaid, unspoken. Like the film is a visual medium, and once again, like this is using it's using every bit of that medium to get things across.
Yeah. Yeah. Music is one thing I've definitely meant to
Yes,
talk
yes,
about.
thank you. Yeah.
So there's this interesting. I don't want to say totally unique, but I don't remember any other movie ever quite doing it this way, where there are like these interludes in the film. There's like three or four of them where it's partially to convey the passage of time in a sort of montage fashion, and we're seeing these scenes of each of our two characters, sometimes alone, sometimes together. Very often it'll just be him like working and smoking, or it'll be her like you know at her work or in her house, like sitting and staring. And and you hear this. I don't remember. I don't actually know what instrument it is, but it's a stringed instrument, one or the other. It's a stringed instrument, and it's like the same exact melody every time. So it's not like, oh, there's a motif that repeats. It's like, no, no, it's the same song, and it just repeats, and it's like a musical interlude almost with the same
Hmm.
song. And every time it happens, it has a really powerful effect. I've just never. I mean, obviously, it's not like it's new to say like, oh, music has powerful effects on the emotions. Obviously, everyone knows this. It's how music is always used. But it's like there was something about the repetition of the song where, like, each time it repeated, it was like it landed harder somehow. I thought that was really interesting and unique.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I wish I had something clever to say about that. Once again, my constant refrain with music is I like it. It's very effective, and I thought the music in this movie was very, very effective multiple times. And I did kind of notice the thing you're talking about here. I just don't have anything to say about it beyond what you've already said very well. But it
Yeah,
is it is certainly like um, a contribution to the feeling of this whole thing.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the movie's got a soundtrack, so I think maybe I'll listen to it later because it's really it's really good stuff on its own, and I'm kind of fascinated with the way that it's worked into the film, because it doesn't seem like it's not. What am I trying to like? I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not used the way any other film score is used.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, I
Yeah,
I,
no,
I
I
think
like
that's really
that.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, gosh. Anything else? Anything else you wanted to say about In the Mood for Love? Have you seen any other Wong Kar Wai film, by the way? Is this your
Not that
first?
no, I don't think so. Um,
Yeah, I was looking at them as well, and I think this is my first as well. I think the other one that he's most well known for is a film called Chungking Express. Um, also another Hong Kong film, came out in '94. Very, very good film from what I understand, but I haven't seen it.
yeah, I don't think I have seen any of these
Also, there's apparently
movies.
kind of a sequel to this movie called
Oh no.
2046.
Oh. Okay.
Um,
Interesting.
I mean, it's not really, but it 2046 is the name of is the number of the hotel room they stayed in when they were
Oh,
working on
okay.
the serial,
Huh.
and it stars Tony Leung as Chow.
Hmm.
Um, and several women enter a science fiction author's life over the course of a few years after the author has lost the woman he considers his one true love.
Huh. Okay. Well, that sounds cool. I'm kind of curious. Kind of curious.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be, devastating. That's that is very cool to know. One thing I was going to say as we were talking, I was looking at posters. Or actually, I was trying to look up images like
Hmm.
frames so that I could comment on things that I noticed, and then I saw some posters, and it's very funny to me that some of these posters show the two characters in like a passionate embrace
Yeah,
that
which
that
which never
that
happens.
definitely never happens. It's just funny that like, and it makes sense that this is how you would want to sell the movie, but it's
Yeah,
like no, not even,
I saw
not
that too,
even.
and like my initial reaction was, did I look away from the screen and miss a pivotal moment in this movie? I don't think
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
I guess one of the other things I did want to talk about is the choice of the setting. I mean, Hong Kong in the '60s is, I think, and excuse me, I'm not up on my Hong Kong history, but I think the '60s was like a really dramatically changing time for Hong Kong. Like I think it is like a boom of industry and the economy there that kind of changed the city forever. And so the choice to kind of set this thing right before that happens in the early '60s, right before Hong Kong really starts to dramatically change. Like one of the things I did read is that Wong Kar-Wai was kind of obsessed with recreating the Hong Kong in the early '60s that he remembered as a child, and they had a really hard time doing that because like these places just don't exist in Hong Kong anymore at all.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so they had to go to other cities to find approximations, and it was a giant pain in the ass to do this. And so, a really interesting choice to not only set it in Hong Kong, I guess, which makes sense as a Hong Kong director, but like to choose to make it a period piece because it didn't have to be, right. Like
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I think I like about this movie is these kind of relationships are almost timeless. That this could happen now, today. But there is something very specific about this place at this time, that I find just interesting without fully understanding and knowing the history of Hong Kong.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by the history of Hong Kong. Personally, I read a bunch of books about the history of Hong Kong, and I actually visited Hong Kong in like 1997. I was a kid, which was the same year that it was. So just very brief
Was that
history
the
lesson.
return?
Yeah, that was the year that it was returned. So I
Hmm.
visited before. I visited when it was still under, I guess, British control.
Yeah,
I say I visited. My family visited. I was a child, but I was, I was old enough to be aware of the kind of unique moment, and it was a very unusual place, to be honest. It was. I mean, I've been to a bunch of places in Asia. It was a very unique place. Obviously, this was decades after the '60s, but I only mention this to say, like, yeah, I think there is something special about Hong Kong historically,
hmm
culturally. It's this incredibly unique melting pot of cultures in Asia, and
yeah,
and like I think we see some of that in this movie, right? Just in the way people dress, it's and the way the foods people eat. It's this constant sort of tension between what we think of as Western and what we think of as Eastern cultural notes.
yeah, hmm
And that's all. I mean, I you got to assume all of that is very carefully done and intentional because again, like you just said, they had to reconstruct all of it.
yep,
So it's not like they just accidentally had something be a little, this style and that style. It's even a plot point. The idea that like, oh yeah, my husband brought back a rice cooker from Japan. It's like
hmm
this, the technology and cultural shifts that are happening. His boss is Japanese, right? There's all these ideas of cultural and technological flux happening around these characters, and it's almost left them behind, and they feel left behind. I think
yeah.
that's part of what it's doing in the movie. So
Yeah, and but I think textually, like the explosion of industry that happens in Hong Kong at about this time also chases everyone away. Like, we see that their two landlords that they used to live with have all left
Hmm.
by the end of the movie.
Hmm.
And so it is kind of recognizing it as this big shift in this place that leaves, you know, that makes people feel like they're left even more behind.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. I was
Yeah.
just unclear. Is this before or after he gets the 10 rings?
God damn it. Do we have to do that? We almost made it all the way throughout this movie without
I know.
mentioning this
It's
is
I was not gonna do that, but I was like, I have to ruin the serious conversation that we're having. I mean, it's just that that's the only other movie that I recognize
Mhm.
Tony Leung from. So
I think it's good to say that both Tony Leung and Maggie Chung at the time of this movie were like the biggest stars in Hong
mhm,
Kong, like at least two of the biggest stars in Hong Kong. So like this idea that you take these two incredibly beloved actors and team them up in a romance movie and then they never get together
mhm,
is like almost like perfect stunt casting. Like I think that is part of it, right? Like
mhm,
these are the type of things that we can't truly appreciate, watching a movie from a different country that came out 20 something years ago. But like imagine what it must have been like to be like a super fan of one or both of these actors, and you learn that they're in a movie together, a romance film together,
mhm.
and you go to the theater to see the movie and nothing happens.
Yeah.
And like and part of like and that's constructed, right?
Uh,
Because like you feel even more the yearning and the desire for something to happen, because you the viewer love these actors so much and want to get to see them get together in this, and of course that doesn't ever happen. Like that's so great. That's so great.
yeah. No, I didn't know that, and that does add another layer of deliciousness to this bittersweet pie.
Mhm. Gosh, what a movie.
Yeah.
I like this series has been such a joy, right? This is, I think, the eighth film we've done. There's only been like one or two I was like just on. I've loved most of them, but this one feels unique and different to me in a different kind of way.
Yeah, it was a good idea for us to try to watch
Mhm.
the movies that people say are the best movies in the world.
Yeah, I kind of want to keep going, but I think we should do other stuff first and maybe come back to it.
Yeah, I
But
would not at all be averse to revisiting this as a show
cool.
concept.
Well, fortunately, we still have three more movies after this one, Matt. We have your fifth pick, my fifth pick, and then, of course, we are going to watch the number one film of all time as well. So the next movie we'll be covering is, as I said, your fifth pick, and we're going back to Mr. Lynch. Matt, you started your picks with David Lynch, and you're ending your picks with David Lynch because we're talking about Mulholland Drive next.
All right, I am genuinely very excited.
I think this is another one that's pretty high up there. I think this is number 7 or possibly 6 on our list. So
Okay.
we're rounding things out with the very 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 top echelon of filmmaking. So I'm really excited about this movie. This is a movie I have seen before, but I adore, and I'm looking forward to getting your experience to it.
Yeah. All right. Great.
So we will be doing that very, very soon. Not next week. Next week we have a patron produced episode we have to do. But after that, we'll get to Mulholland Drive.
Perfect.
Do doof.
All right, Matt. We are finished with Mr. Wong Kar-Wai and In the Mood for Love. And now I've got to talk about I think you would probably say like an equally good film, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. In some regards, at least if you really like wolves.
Matt, what are you talking about?
I just want to talk about the film Alpha, which came out in the year 2018. So it's not super old, relatively new-ish movie. And it's a movie that I knew like nothing about. And my parents visited and they were like, I think your kids would like Alpha. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I guess we can try it. Um, I've said before that my parents usually have good taste, and or at least they have taste that matches mine. Somehow, mysteriously, who knows how that happened? Um, and so like it's not a great film, right? It's not going to go on the top AFI best films of all time list, but it's like exactly what you want it to be. It's the story of basically like, you know, cave people living like 20,000 years ago, and it executes well on this premise of there's the young man who is on the cusp of adulthood, and he has doubts about himself. He's not as strong as he needs to be, or at least he doesn't see himself as being as strong as he needs to be to survive. And then his father takes him out on the big hunt, and something terrible happens and he's left for dead. And then the movie is him trying to make his way back home across the inhospitable harshness of basically the Ice Age. And you've got your Ice Age era megafauna and, saber-toothed tigers and everything, and like it's all just well done and fun and satisfying and like exactly what you want it to be based on the premise. It's one of the rare times when you hear a premise and you're like, oh, that sounds like that could be fun, and then the movie actually just does the thing that you wanted to happen, and it's great. And my kids really liked it. They were like really into it the whole time. It was maybe like the most engaged with the movie I've ever seen them, and it's a little violent because it's like he's having to like fight animals off and like stab them with spears and stuff. So nothing over the edge. It's all just it's the kind of violence that I see as being like, yeah, I mean, this is like more or less historically accurate, plus or minus. Like people did have to fight for survival for thousands and thousands of years. Anyway, I enjoyed it a lot. I was pleasantly surprised at how much my kids enjoyed it too.
I just want to say, I think you made it through that entire explanation without mentioning that it's the story of how we tamed wolves and made dogs. That's
because that's a spoiler, Scott.
No, it's not. It's called Alpha.
and the poster has him with the wolf. Yeah. So, I mean, that's exactly right. Is like, and I like how the movie treats that too, because it's not like it's obvious that that's going to be the plot of the movie other than the title. It's just like some wolves are hunting him at one point, and then he injures one of them and kind of knows that he should just kill it. But he's like a soft-hearted guy, so he doesn't kill it. He nurses it back to health, and then it's like, well, now it's going to help him. And now they're friends, and it's like, oh, now they're friends. This is great. I'm incredibly invested in this. Yeah, it's very
it's one of those. So I saw this movie when it came out, and I basically agree with everything you said. I think this is one of those things where the marketing made this look like the dumbest fucking movie ever, because they really played up the man meets man's best friend, the origin story of how we tamed the wolf type stuff, and of course that is part of the movie, but it's only part of the movie. And it is as you said, well done in the movie itself. I enjoyed this movie. It's good. Am I thinking of something? Does this movie end with like a collage of dogs showing how wolves turn into dogs, or am I just thinking of something else?
Oh, gosh, that might have been like post credits or something, because I didn't see that. What I was going to comment on, and this is, I guess, a spoiler for the last frame of the movie, if you care, is like it was an incredibly earned last moment where you see the humans like walking out of the shimmering heat haze where it's all just like black and red colors, and they're walking toward the camera, and then like from amongst them you see the silhouettes of the wolves emerge, and they're like interspersed with the humans, and you're like, that's so earned. Yes. And it's 96 minutes. It also has that going for it.
Yeah, wow. I didn't know it was that short.
Yeah. It's a perfect movie.
It just seems like it's because it has to be epic. It must be 3 hours long.
No, it's quite restrained.
Cool. Well, that's Alpha, available now everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
Matt, the thing I wanted to talk about briefly before we talk about streaming services is I wanted to talk about Spider-Man.
All right.
So the new Insomniac Games video game PlayStation 5 exclusive Spider-Man 2 came out Friday,
Okay.
and I got it. I actually, hilariously, this is how adorable my wife is. Like, I watched the trailer to this game back in like May,
Hmm.
and was like, hell yeah, because I love the first one. I watched it. I made my son sit down and watched it with me, and he was riveted. And so my wife's brilliant idea was like, this is perfect. I'll have Logan get Scott Spider-Man 2 for Father's Day.
Uh-huh.
Well, the thing my wife failed to do was to look up when the game comes out.
Uh-huh.
So I got a Father's Day present in June, but it was delivered to me on October 20th. So
That's very funny. I love that.
so yeah, I hopped in this game and been playing it, and my son's been watching me, which has been a delightful experience. But I just like, I don't know, I wanted to talk briefly about open world games again, and the way in which I actually think this game uses the concept very, very well.
Sure.
So I mean, do you know anything about the Insomniac Spider-Man game, the one that came out, I think 3-4 years ago now?
Let's go with no. I mean,
Okay.
not really.
Well, the big the big like selling point with this game and its sequel here is this idea that, you have the entirety of Manhattan to swing through, and like basically it's open world. The entirety of Manhattan is your playground, and you can traverse like Spider-Man, and there's a bunch of things you can do, and it's the kind of the Ubisoft open world model where there's just the map is just peppered with things. And like I usually hate that stuff, but like the traversal in this game is so fucking fun that I don't mind at all.
Uh-huh.
And then this game did a really interesting thing where like one of the things the first game did was each one of these side activities had like a rating system where you could get like bronze, silver, or gold. And I hated that because like it was really hard. Like if I wanted to complete everything, which for some reason in this game I really, really wanted to complete everything, getting gold was tough. This game did away with all that. It's just got a bunch of activities, and there's just a bunch of stuff to do. And the thing, like plot wise, that's really good about this, like the first time an open world game did this really well, is it really puts you in the mind of what it must be like to be Spider-Man, because you're swinging on your way to the next mission, and like suddenly some guy like robs a car, and then on your map pops up is like, oh, heist or bank robbery or something happening. You want to go deal with that? And then while you're doing that, your girlfriend calls you on the phone and tells you this other stuff she wants to do. And there's like 16 things on the map, and you're like, holy crap, I don't have time to do all this stuff. And that's like a large part of what this game is about.
Uh-huh.
And so like the fact that the gameplay has kind of got you into that headspace where you kind of feel that way, I thought was just remarkably well done, actually.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that is great because I think with superhero video games, I feel like there's always a tendency to err in the direction of like making it a power fantasy.
Hmm.
Um, because that's, if you're going to be Spider-Man, you might as well be awesome. But like that narratively, that's not who Spider-Man is really. Like Spider-Man's miserable all the time in every Spider-Man story. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, no, it's really, really cool. I really like that. I like what you pointed out about, using the open world concept to work into this idea of
Yeah.
everything is kind of set against you.
And this game does. I mean, it also makes the world bigger, as these games always do. Now it's not just Manhattan; it's also Brooklyn and Queens you can go to. So the map's even bigger. There's more things to do. I actually think the game is shorter though, which I don't mind. I think it's like a 15-hour game if you don't complete everything, and like a 25-hour game if you do,
Mm-hmm.
which is still a lot of time, and is very appreciative of me with my limited time. I think I'm close
Mm-hmm.
to beating it. You get to play as two Spider-Man. You have Peter Parker and Miles Morales are both there, and you get to switch between them. It's a fun game. I wholeheartedly recommend it. Like the plot. I feel like there's something with these open world games where like the story's never going to be great because the pacing's never going to be perfect, because you can just run around and kind of do the game at your leisure. I enjoy some of what it's doing, but like it's like, it's never gonna like be the greatest story you've ever played or anything. But Matt, there's one thing that's
Uh-huh.
the coolest thing in this game is
Okay.
just the fast travel system. So I've just talked wonderfully about how fun traversal is, and
Uh-huh.
traversal is great and fun and so wonderful in this game. But they also have a fast travel system. So in the first game, it was on PS4, and the fast travel system was there were various subways dotted around the map, and you could click on the subway, and you would see a short cutscene, and then Peter would appear at the subway station, and that's how you fast traveled around. In this game, you open up the map, you can click any point on the map and press fast travel, and you are there
Uh-huh.
instantly. The map will literally, like from your map screen, it will just zoom in to that spot in the city, and your character is now there. It takes a second and a half, and it's the coolest thing ever. It's so cool. And like, I know this isn't new for people that have had like flash drives on their PC forever, but like, it's just really cool to actually see in action. Like, it's just, I'm glad it's using the hardware it has effectively here, because it's just like anywhere on the map, anywhere, just boom, you're there.
Well, obviously, I'm disappointed that the game isn't making you suffer because that's my preferred game design philosophy. But it does. I get what you're saying. No, like definitely the idea of it's actually funny that you say that because like yeah, like our whole lives, like literally our whole lives, games have been designed around the idea that you've got to load
Mhm.
zones, and very often the game makers have been very clever to like hide that this is what was going on, but the fact that they had to hide it was was causing other decisions that were having downstream effects on the gameplay experience. So I'm like, yeah, like I totally get why that would be sort of almost shocking
Yeah.
to experience. To like, oh, you're just uh, uh, I'm already here. What?
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's cool.
Yeah, and I mean, the combat itself is fine. It's not great, but it's not terrible. It's, it's serviceable.
Hmm.
Like, I think like the God of War combat is better
Hmm.
than this combat. But there are moments where like everything gets too chaotic and just you can't tell what the fuck is going on. But
Hmm.
there's moments where like you're just jumping into a bunch of enemies and like webbing up people and flipping around, and you just feel like Spider-Man. So it
Hmm.
has its peaks and valleys, I think.
Hmm.
And there's a Venom in it, which is pretty cool. It's doing the symbiote stuff. So
Cool.
if you're a fan of Spider-Man 3, you're gonna have some stuff to like in this game, that's for sure.
I have always liked the Venom. I might get
Hmm.
this game. I don't. It's been a while since I played a PS5 game in any
Yeah,
kind
I
of
think it's worth it.
serious
They
way.
they did re-release the first one on PS5 as well. So there's Spider-Man, which is the first one that came out on PS4. Then they made Spider-Man Miles Morales, which is not a full sequel, but not a small game either. That was a PS5, I think, release title that was good as well. And then they have this one officially, Spider-Man 2, where you get to be
Cool.
both of them. Really
Excellent.
like they missed the opportunity to do co-op in this game. There's two Spider-Men, but you can't play two player at all, which is a
I was.
bummer.
Is there at least like I don't know what the right word is, but you've got boy, right? You've got an NPC that's on your side. Is there any of that in this movie or game?
Yeah, I mean, there are various missions where you have both Spider-Mans together doing the mission at the same time. There's missions where you are by yourself, and then there's also ones where you're with different characters just in the Spider-Man universe.
Okay, that's cool.
I think one of the coolest things is like, you're swinging around the city, you see a crime being committed, you jump in and ready to fight people, and then like Miles is there already and he's
Hmm.
fighting them. And it's like, oh, hey. And then you do like team up button cool moves. And like that was totally dynamic. Like I didn't know
Uh-huh.
he was there, but he was just there. It's just one of those little things that helps the game feel a little bit more real.
Yeah,
It was cool.
no, that's very awesome.
Yeah, it's a fun game. I think I'm close to finishing it, which tells you how relatively short it is because it just came out Friday, and I don't have too much time to play games these days. I stayed up way too late last night playing it and paid for it when my daughter did not make it to 3 o'clock before she woke up the first time. So it was a rough night, but worth
Yeah,
it.
well, that's a strong endorsement.
Yeah, yeah. So everyone should check out Spider-Man 2 if they have a PS2. I don't know. Like, I was trying to debate whether I should say, "Oh, you gotta play the first two before you play this, Matt." I mean, Spider-Man stuff. You know, there's
I do.
Doc Ock. I mean, the game's good. Like the first two are really good games if you're looking for games where you like web slinging. But you don't. If you just want to jump into Spider-Man 2 because it's the new hotness, I don't think you'll be confused about what's going on.
That's probably what I'll do if I end up getting
Mhm.
one of them, and then if I love it so much, then I might go backwards and get the other
Sure.
one. Yeah.
They also added, so the web slinging in this game helps you a lot, which is what makes it cool, right? It's
Uh-huh.
very fluid. You go very fast, and it's like there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that like makes that happen. And they added a slider to this game where you could turn that effect down or all the way off.
Uh-huh.
And it's very funny to web sling around New York with that slider all the way down, where you realize, oh my God, I didn't know how much they were helping. Because like
That's funny.
one of the big things is like with it cranked all the way up, when you like the direction you're facing, you kind of always continue the momentum in that direction,
Uh-huh.
even if you shoot webs off to the left or right. Yeah, if you're going down a street and you've got skyscrapers on either side, like you don't get pulled in the direction that you shot your web at all.
Uh-huh.
But when you turn that off, you do.
Yeah.
And it's just like you just mess up a lot more. Like I think the game is more fun when you keep that slider all the way up because it allows you to just feel like Spider-Man truly. But it is fun to turn it off and then just try to run around the city.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it strikes me that it might be fun to start with it off and just struggle and basically be like a young trainee Spider-Man, and then turn it on when you're sick of that, and
Yeah.
be like, yeah.
The original also didn't have any fall damage. Like you could jump off the tallest building in New York and you'll just superhero land on the street.
Mm-hmm.
They had a toggle in this game where you can turn fall damage on, and it's also very funny. It's just like, here's these toggles that you can make it more realistic, but kind of less fun. And it just goes to accentuate like how cool the design is, and all these systems are working behind the scenes to make it better without you even realizing it.
It is cool that they made that an option, but personally, I've always thought that Spider-Man, like, is a spider, is like the key thing.
Mm-hmm.
So of course he's immune to fall damage.
Yeah.
Like that's almost like definitionally how strong he is. Is he strong enough? If he's strong enough to pull himself around through the air by the strength of his own arms, and to smack into a wall at 7,000 miles an hour and just like stick there, it's like, yeah, of course he can. Landing from terminal velocity fall would be trivial to him. He would.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah,
totally. Did I ever tell you about the time when I was like 8 or possibly younger, hopefully younger, where I came to the conscious realization that I would never be Spider-Man, that getting bit by a spider and turning into Spider-Man is impossible?
Well, we've never talked about this. No.
That I have a very distinct memory of having this realization that I was like, oh, and I just got really sad for a while. Like at some point in my life, I decided that this was possible, not likely, but possible. And then I had this life destroying realization that no, not possible. Never gonna happen.
You never really know what's within the limits of advanced nanotechnology.
Sure, Matt.
You never know.
The last thing I'll say about this game is it's actually surprisingly buggy. Unfortunately, my game has crashed 4 times, just totally crashed, and I've gotten soft locked several times where like it just goes to load something, and like there's this thing it does when they introduce new techniques and abilities to you. It does like a quick tutorial menu, and it makes you press that sequence of buttons, and so it freezes the game until you do so. And I've just pressed the sequence, and it just didn't do it. And the only way I could figure out how to get out of that position is to just shut off the game and turn it back on. So yeah, some disappointing bugs, but not too terrible.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of my experience with God of War Ragnarok. So I think like when they're really pushing themselves on these newest gen games, and I think a lot of stuff like that is probably falling through the cracks.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so that is my thing. I don't want to compare our things, but seems like Spider-Man 2 is better than Alpha.
I don't know, man. I'll just have to play and find out.
I think it's selling really well, though. I think it's like one of the fastest selling PS5 games, which I know isn't a very specific like modifier on that, because there haven't been too many still PS5 exclusive games.
Well, everybody loves Spider-Man, so that's not super surprising.
Everybody loves Spider-Man. Gosh, my son is Spider-Man for Halloween, and he's obsessed with Spider-Man.
Yeah, I'm always obsessed by Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man.
This game lets you have a lot of different kinds of spider suits on, like a lot. And my son wants Spider-Man to be yellow and does not like when Spider-Man is not yellow.
That's so interesting. I wonder where he got the idea of a yellow Spider-Man.
I think he just really likes yellow as a color.
Okay,
And he saw
cool.
that one of the suits was yellow and was like, that one. And then the problem is there's a point in the game where Venom gets involved, and I have to be black suit, and he did not like that. He was not happy about that.
Yeah.
Spider-Man yellow. Yellow.
You see, the symbiont is yellow.
he didn't get it.
And I'm pretty sure that, like, canonically, the symbiont can also just like change its form arbitrarily. So the symbiont could have made a yellow suit.
Sure.
I'm just saying.
Yeah,
Just saying.
it could have done whatever it wants, but it didn't. It didn't, because it was black, and it had to be black.
Yep.
And I thought I found a way where I could turn to the yellow suit, but then when you use your Uber power, you turn to black suit Spider-Man. And he's like, he noticed it immediately. Immediately. He's like, where'd yellow Spider-Man go? Sorry,
Adorable.
buddy.
I love it.
Also, one of the criminals was a girl, and I punched her in the face, and he did not like that. He was like, Spider-Man hit mama. Nobody.
Aww.
Spider-Man did not hit mama. That was a bad guy.
She was bad. She deserved it.
Yeah, that's difficult to explain, because I've spent the last year telling him that punching is bad and we don't punch. And then I'm playing this game where I just beat the shit out of people.
It's not real. It's not real.
Yeah. It's like, you don't understand. They've committed crimes.
Yeah, they deserve this. They forfeited their lives by committing crimes.
There you go. Yeah. All right, let's just have that be the end of the episode. I think we talked for a while on Alpha and even longer on Spider-Man somehow. So I think that'll be good. That'll be good for the week for us.
Sounds good.
All right. So if you have any comments or questions or anything or any opinions on any of the stuff we talked about today on Wong Kar-Wai's In the Mood for Love, on Spider-Man 2, or on the hit 2018 action adventure classic Alpha. I'm being so mean. I'm sorry. This is a good movie. I'm sorry.
You liked it, yeah.
I did. You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, or over on Twitter @doofmedia, or on our subreddit r/doofmedia, where there will be a post for this episode. I think, Matt, as I was saying that, I realized what happened is there's a movie called 20,000 BC. You remember that movie?
Yeah.
It's awful. It's a terrible fucking movie. And I think I just mentally confuse these two movies in my head constantly.
Oh, okay.
And so I just, or maybe it was 10,000 BC. I think it was 10,000 BC.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen that.
It's real bad. It's a Roland Emmerich movie. Remember when he used to be good? And then he made
No.
What? Independence Day.
Oh yeah, right. I guess so. Oh, you know what's funny is like, oh yes. Sorry, I was looking up the trailer. This movie made way more money than Alpha. That's such a travesty.
It was so, yeah. I mean, it was like a huge movie that was really bad.
Oh well.
Yeah. I confuse them in my head. I don't know why I do that.
Well, it's because they're basically the same, except one of them has a wolf, which makes it a million times better.
Yeah. Honestly, while you were talking about it, I was like, is this the movie where they like end up in like ancient Egypt or something?
Uh-huh.
I was like, no, that's 10,000 BC.
Yeah, that's 10,000 BC. Yeah.
Oh my God. Anyway, that's it. Continue with the outro. I'm sorry I derailed us.
That's no worries. If you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to do so you'll never miss an episode. You can find us on any of the available podcasting platforms.
And if you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. Head on over to patreon.com/Doof Media and pledge at any of the available levels. You can help us pick our monthly book club topic, which is happening right now. That poll is live right now. It will be closing on Friday the 27th, because Friday the 27th at 9:30 p.m. is when our book club is meeting for this month. We're going to be over on our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Doof Media, where we will be discussing this month's book, which is House of Leaves. Oh my gosh. Hell of a book that we're going to have lots to say about. So if you've read House of Leaves or are just curious and want to hang out with us as we talk about it, you can show up at our YouTube page at 9:30 p.m. Central Time on October the 27th and talk House of Leaves with us.
That's right. Come join us and get lost in the labyrinth. Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts. Every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right. As we mentioned, next week we have a patron-produced episode lined up. One of our patrons donated at the level that allows them to do that, and they have requested the film Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Matt, ironically, this is a movie that made it pretty high up the BFI Sight and Sound poll as well. So we're kind of, neither of us picked it, but we're kind of on brand still, I think.
Yeah, we're double dipping is what we're doing.
Yeah. So we'll be watching and talking about that movie next week. We'll see you then.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.